Hi everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's episode, it's part 2 with my up north bonsai conversation with Tim Cox. I'm still in the midst of my fall color walk here at the Lake Park, where I spotted some really cool trees. I love the one behind me over my shoulder. I love the curly, gnarly movement on that tree back there. All natural, of course. No wires needed for that. Tim Cox is the interview. This is part 2, and we move on with our Up North Bonsai podcast, where we ask Tim to talk a little bit about the winter solstice and then the spring equinox. So let's go back out to Tim with the Up North Bonsai podcast. So you have this built on, is it a 3-season porch then?
Yes,
you keep it cool, right?
It's unheated.
So what is your winter then? You got winter storage. Every tree goes in there?
Not every tree. I do leave some of the really hardy stuff out. I have a niche on the other side of the porch that gets me out of the wind, because wind seems to be the biggest issue more than cold.
Yeah.
You know, we don't see much sub-zero here. We do see a little. But
Sure. And it's out of direct sun over there too then?
It gets a little bit.
Does it?
But
not enough to
mostly.
worry?
Yeah, not enough to worry. So I can put a dozen big trees over there if I want. But the things I want to protect, I have, well, like this bench. I move benches inside, and I've got a metal rack that I use, and I can water them there, and I got a way to keep the water off the floor. And you know, it's if it gets low, I have a ceramic heater with a rheostat. And it'll come on at about 28, and it goes off at about 45.
Yeah. And I would imagine you're not having a lot of humidity issues in that big space?
Heck no.
Yeah. You got good control over that.
Well, and what I did was, on this side there are big windows, but on the other side there are little windows high, and all I have to do is get a cross flow, and I can really vent that thing quickly.
Yeah. Any fans inside? Or
have a ceiling fan.
Okay.
And I run it all winter.
Yeah. Non-stop?
Yep.
Yeah. Keeping that air flowing. And then how often do you have to water in this kind of a cold frame addition to your house?
Yeah, I think you really need to water at least once a month, and I probably do more than I should.
Yeah.
But again, I'm back to soil, and it doesn't hold it so much, so I don't worry about it becoming really mushy wet.
Yeah. Any other things in your cold frame that, you know, what would you tell someone that's important about winter storage and winter care? I mean, what do you really
I don't have any light.
on?
I have.
Okay, give me your light philosophy.
Well, I don't think they need it. We have light. I don't have any direct sun. I don't have any. I have blinds in the grow room, and you know, I just keep everything.
It's been dark for years, but more and more people are putting lights on.
Not me.
What's that all about? You don't.
Not me.
Don't need it. Why bother?
Well, I'm very pragmatic. I haven't felt the need to investigate that, because they do very well without. So I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like soil, there's always a debate about something.
Yeah.
To light or to not to light.
Well, and I don't like to debate anybody. If something works for you, go for it.
Sure.
I know what works for me.
Yeah. So we haven't hit spring yet, but your success or your philosophy on repotting trees, how often and why? I know this is a much more mature, refined tree, but talk about repotting then, because I don't want to repot every year for some trees.
It's a challenge, and I read and I listen, and maybe more than I should. But this tree's been repotted 3 times since 2014. Most recently this year in the spring, and man, it didn't pause. I saw bud growth, extension of candles. It was just it was the right thing to do, and it was very tight in the pot.
Yeah.
But that's the way they grow.
Yeah.
When you get them off the rock ledges or the rock pockets.
Right.
That's the way they are. So as far as other species, I'm no expert about when to repot, and I'm sure I've made mistakes. But for the most part, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Because I have a couple of boxwoods that are just small but fun little trees, and this year I'm having amazing growth on the foliage of my boxwood.
Yeah.
But the roots on a boxwood, I mean, I just have a garden variety nursery boxwood, but the roots are out of this world growth. So I mean, I think I have to repot that more. Oh my gosh, they grow.
Well, there's certainly trees I think you have to do every year.
Yeah.
Maples may maybe.
Yeah.
Boxwood could be. I don't grow boxwood, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I killed a boxwood earlier in my bonsai journey, and you know.
And that was that.
Yep. I might get back to them one day.
Springtime. Right out of the gate, spring seems to be the busiest season for everybody in bonsai. And I've heard other people talk about other seasons being just as busy, but you just repotted, what did you say, a third or two-thirds of your trees this year. Spring in Michigan for you to keep your trees strong and healthy. We just talked about repotting. What does a successful spring look like for you?
As soon as the sun's out, you take your bonsai into the yard, and usually that night you put them up. It's called the bonsai shuffle. And you know, it sounds funny, but you got to do it. Now, this year,
and why do you have to do it?
This year I pushed things, well,
Okay.
because they frost and you don't want to lose your new buds.
But why get them out so early then? Why not just wait a couple more weeks?
I think it's better for the trees. You know, they're feeling the fact that it's spring.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I don't have much direct sun on my porch, they're feeling
but
it.
they know
It's the
time.
length of the day.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so much better. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of my friends in Michigan use greenhouses, and they use greenhouses and they put them out there and they don't have to worry.
Yeah.
And they're real early, and I think they get a whole lot more growth out of it.
For sure.
I don't have a lot of room for a greenhouse here, although
Yeah.
I'm certainly considering it. But you know,
Yeah. So get them out as early as possible because it's just that much better for the tree.
Yeah.
But you've got to play the shuffle because you can't let them.
you got you. I don't mind. I don't mind cold temperature. I don't mind a little light frost.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't always listen to the weather person.
Right.
You know, you got to be really pretty careful.
Well, again, in your microclimate,
Yeah.
compared to the other suburb
Yeah.
on the other side of, for me, the metro.
Yeah, I have found that I don't get nearly as cold here as the TV news weather says.
Sure.
So I can be a little more lax.
Yeah. Is there something to be said for the temperature extremes, and what are you trying to avoid with temperature extremes? Because you are just moving things around, and the trees like, because the joke about ficus often is, you know, ficus, you move it from a window in your house here to this side of your house, the leaves are all going to fall off.
Drops all its leaves, yeah.
So like when you're taking these trees in and out, like,
I
are we
don't-
not creating some stress, or you can tell me more?
Well, I think you're right. Early on, I bought my supplies, fertilizers, and some soil from a grow store that sold to people who grow cannabis.
Yeah.
And the guy who owned the place was really, he's Mr. Natural, and he said to me, you know, these trees in nature freeze sometimes, and it's part of their cycle, and you really need to pay attention to that. And I think that has stretched my idea about how much they can take, and it may be good for them.
Sure.
So I don't know. I mean, you could go to things like controlled burns and prairies, and you know, I think this is all somewhat interrelated.
Sure.
Nature does a lot more severe, brings in a lot more severity than we sometimes do,
Right.
and you got to pay attention to that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I take them out early. I sometimes leave them out overnight, and the next morning go, oh, did I do the wrong thing? But I haven't really had a major failure. So
Yeah, good. So spring care, then you're repotting, and are you doing any again some preventatives for the insects, or preventatives for fungus, or what are you doing in that realm?
well, I haven't been as active as I should about fungus. I think that's why I got it this year. And you know, I hate to just dump tons of
Stuff.
pretty toxic stuff. But Jack Sustick, former curator of the National Bonsai and Pinching Museum, said to me this spring, if you have trees at this level, you don't have a choice. And he's right. So I have a mask and goggles and gloves and a whole suit, and I do my part.
Yeah.
And the fungus seems to be gone.
Gone. Yeah, I think I had some fungus issues this year as well, and I don't have any of the
I've never lost big
gloves
trees,
yet. Yeah.
and I lost 2 this year.
2 of them. Wow.
Yeah. And that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, people joke about them being our kids, but they are.
Yeah. Absolutely, they are, and a lot of money for a lot of people if they're getting big trees at auction, and like you said, when you're getting some of these trees from some of the people out there, that's a lot of investment.
Yeah, it is. And then you've got so much time in them.
I've discovered a sea of lilac bushes. Now there's some fall color, huh? Some beautiful deep reds and burgundy colors. So we wrap up the interview with talking about professionals and all the multiple opinions with professionals, the benefits of joining a club, and we talk about Jack Weichel, the Michigan bonsai legend, and the legacy auction they had this past summer. So Tim Cox was heavily involved in that. And then we finish up with some of Tim's tips for beginners.
I mean, it took me 3 months to decide to take this branch off. Literally.
Yeah, 3 months of hemming and hawing, huh?
Yeah, Maruo Stemberger was the guest artist at our show this year.
Okay.
And of course, this one won Best of Show in Chicago, and I thought, oh yeah, well, we'll do real well at Meyer Gardens. Well, this is not the style of tree he likes as well. But during a walkthrough critique,
Yeah.
he looked at this and very quickly said, I think it'd be balanced so much better if you take this off.
Yeah.
And I wrangled with it a bit. I knew he was onto something. He's a smart guy, and he's got an eye for design that's way better than mine. And so I decided to do it.
Yeah.
But it took a while.
One of the things I've heard from people I've talked to with professionals or guest speakers and people coming through that can be challenging is, you will get 3 professionals coming through looking at a tree, and they'll want to do 3 different things to the tree. So do you have you had any run-ins, or have you had any thoughts about, which trees you bring, because or you just totally trust who's there that day?
Well, it doesn't mean I'm going to take their advice. I mean, I did say it took me 3 months.
That's right.
But it's no, I never think about that.
Okay.
I did take a class with Maru this year,
Okay.
in which we really altered a tree, but it needed it. It was a difficult tree, and he made something out of it that was way nicer than I thought.
Yeah.
And it's the way it is.
So let me piggyback that to a question about clubs then. So you just had a club meeting last night, and tell me about your club and the benefits and how do you feel towards club activity and how that can enhance some people's bonsai journey.
I don't know about other clubs, but I can talk about this one. I've been president of this club for 11 years, I think, 10 years.
It must be a good club then.
Well, it wasn't, and it was run by someone who had kind of outlived her interest.
Oh, sure.
And a lot of people are not very kind to her, but at the same time, I heard that the club. I was a member then, and I had heard her say, I've got to get away from this. I've got some health issues, yada yada yada.
Yeah,
and we have a unique situation in that we meet at Frederick Meyer Gardens and Sculpture Park for free. And if we leave, and if the club folds, it would be very difficult to get back in. There's quite a list of horticulture clubs that want to meet there. And I mean, it's been a really good relationship. So I said at a picnic, I'll run for president. We don't need to lose this slot.
Yeah.
And immediately it became a sword fight. And that wasn't my idea, but
yeah.
But so we didn't have very many members, and we took a vote, and it was tied. And it was like, what are we going to do? So they kicked us out of the 2 of us out of the room, and I'm not sure what happened, but they called us back in and said, Tim's president.
There you go.
And
so what do you like about it today? What's making it good?
We had 6 members, and we owed $300 when I took over.
When you took over, okay.
I can tell you that last night we had 38 people at the workshop, and our treasury's good. So and we're responsible. We work hard,
Yeah.
and that's really fun. It's fun to bring all these new people in, and we have a lot of new people.
Yeah.
Not everybody's suited for a club situation. So some people, many I know in this town, don't attend meetings, but they'll come and do a program for me.
Okay.
And so I think you need to really stay involved
Yeah.
in the community.
Yeah.
And give kudos where you can,
Yeah.
get help where you can.
Yeah. Can you tell me how? Because this is in the club. I've been a part of MBS now for 6 years, and how do you balance the new folks with the veterans, and everything in between? How are you balancing that in your club to really reach everybody?
That's a great question. That's hard.
It is hard, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and so I'm trying to get out of so much leadership in the club, And so we have co-presidents.
Yeah.
And it's working pretty well. And he and I both have really complementary strengths.
Okay.
And he's a ABS board member. It's Joe Churko, and his wife's our treasurer. I mean, we aren't encumbered by tons of rules, and we just make it work. You
show up and make it work.
Yeah, you show up and make it work. We do a little planning a couple times a year.
Yeah.
We have one more program scheduled for August, and we really need to sit down and figure out what we're going to do in the fall.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have it too far ahead, but we've been really, really fortunate to get good people to present. And
sounds like it.
Part of that is Joe's circle of friends. Some of those are mine.
Yeah.
We just work whatever we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that happens at MBS too, and it's the folks that have been around for that 15-year plus now that there's connections, and we have Andrew Robeson come on by and do a Zoom with us or something.
Yeah,
we have that access is fantastic.
We used him during the pandemic. He was very
absolutely.
good.
Yeah, very good.
We need to go back to him. Fall.
There you go.
You got it.
Yeah, I just found out on this trip that he's coming to Minnesota for a weekend that we get to work with him. So,
oh, how nice!
So I'm going to hopefully
nice.
work with Andrew soon. So fantastic, and it's such a small community. There's people all over the country, but everybody seems to know everybody evenently, and it's been fantastic.
I'm not so connected on the West Coast.
Yeah.
I do know Ryan Neal, and I do know Michael Hagedorn, both of which I met here.
Yeah.
And but for the most part, my association is from the Mississippi, or maybe a little further east.
In east, yeah, for sure.
There's one at the U of M Gardens at Mathai in Ann Arbor.
Yep.
There is one at Meyer Gardens here, fairly new.
Yeah.
And there is one at Hidden Lake Gardens, which is a Michigan State facility in Tipton, Michigan, which is like in the middle of nowhere. And Jack Weichel was the original curator of that. There's I gave you an article out of ABS. It talks a little bit about how he got there, and he was, I think, an education specialist and was interested in bonsai, and asked if he could put a couple of his bonsai in the greenhouse, and it evolved into a bonsai courtyard with a decent collection. Not all his.
Yeah.
And so 50 years later, he is still the curator of this collection, and he just turned 90. So he's a mentor of mine, and I was sitting at his dining room table. We were having lunch, and let me back up. Jack sold his collection of big trees about 10 years ago, and he said, I'm doing it while I can.
Yeah.
But Jack grows little trees, and some species that people would think needed dormancy that don't.
Yeah.
Cotoneaster.
Junipers for sure.
Junipers, and he has terrific junipers.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of amazing what he has, and he grows them under light in the basement, and they're like, whoa. So I said to him, Jack, what would you like us to do with the little trees when you're gone?
Yeah.
Because Jack's a real practical guy. He's not feeling like I'm being morbid.
Right.
and his response was, what do you think? And that started a dialogue that ended up in the Jack Weichel Bonsai Legacy auction and fundraiser. There are really two parts to this.
Right.
So this was about a year and a half ago, and we explored some things. By the way, he says this whole thing's my fault. but
he can thank you and he can blame you at the same time.
Yeah, Jack doesn't blame anybody. So, and everybody knows Jack Weichel. He's been in the bonsai world, 50 years. Yeah. And is very kind with his time. He's the oldest member of the Ann Arbor Bonsai Club, which is probably one of the premier in the country. I mean, they have a huge membership and they do great stuff. So we started talking, and it evolved into... I suggested an auction pretty quickly. I thought of bonsai auction, but that didn't work. Their format didn't work for us. And so fairly early on, he said, I'd like to sell not only my trees, but my stuff. And I want to donate the proceeds, all of them, to something at Hidden Lake Gardens. And so, we had a loose group of people talking about this. He went to an attorney who took him to the Lenawee Community Foundation, and they're community foundations in Michigan oversee money.
Mm-hmm.
You can do directed funds. We're a component fund of them.
Okay.
Any donations are tax exempt. And, you know, we made some really good decisions early on. And then he really looked to me to do the auction.
Yeah,
So I investigated, had really good recommendations, and we found an online auction platform that we could use that would allow us to do live and simulcast auctions, and that expands your base
reach for sure. Yeah.
by a whole bunch. And you know, it culminated in this. Now, there's been a general appeal in the bonsai community among Jack's friends for donations to this fund as well. And what we've said is everything goes toward maintaining the collection at Hidden Lake Gardens.
Yeah.
And, you know, so if we endow this thing, we need an awful lot of money to live off interest.
Right.
So we do have some money. I'm not as big a part of that, although I'm on the steering committee. There are 5 of us that make decisions, and we can vote the money, and with some advice from the community foundation.
Sure.
So so the auction comes around. We had some really good people. Bob Bauer is one of our people. He's an Ann Arbor Bonsai Club person. He just put so much time in on the website and all of that sort of stuff. We decided to do some mini auctions leading up to the main event.
Yeah.
Because Jack started looking in his attic and in his basement, and he had way more stuff than he thought he did. And
50 years worth.
50 years worth of stuff. So so we did 4 mini auctions, one a week for 4 weeks leading up to the big auction. They were kind of designed as a teaser, but also because a lot of stuff we couldn't do it all one day.
For sure.
So we did those. That raised about $7,000, and that was just amazing.
Yeah.
And then we did the day of the auction. We were afraid people were going to walk in and say, "Here, I want to add this," and we can't. It's too involved.
Yeah, right.
In order to get it on the live auction, which, by the way, lasted an hour longer than we had planned anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
We did a silent auction, but you had to be there to participate in that, and that raised a couple $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then the main event, and we had people all over the place. We had somebody monitoring online who worked with the auctioneer.
Mm-hmm.
We had somebody who was like our producer who controlled everything.
Yeah.
You know, we had somebody monitoring. Bob Bauer monitored back in the corner, and I kept slipping back and looking at our total because it was in real time or within a couple seconds. We knew exactly where we were.
Absolutely.
And we didn't really have a goal because we didn't have any clue what this would do.
What it's going to bring in. Yeah.
In my mind, 25 grand was a big number.
Yeah.
Well, toward the very end of the auction, Bob motioned me over and we're at 28,000. And I said, we're going to hit 30. You know, and we went back and forth, and every time we hit, and we look what's over here left to auction, it's like, man, the very last item took us $40 over $30,000.
And so you're up now over 40 for all these things combined.
Yeah. Now we have expenses from that.
Yeah.
But you know, I suspect we'll end up with 35 in the bank or in the foundation, and that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So do you have a clear idea, like, how is this legacy going to work then? It's just
no.
No. How is it going to take care of these trees now, and what's going to be the future of this?
We have a meeting tonight. Tonight's meeting, we're going to account for every penny, and we're going to talk a little bit about the future. And this involves most of the people who were active in the auction.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start meeting as a small group, the people who actually decide. Yeah.
We struggle with that as a club. As people get older and
everybody
these collections, like, what do you do? How do we form a real, clear cut, not too, discombobulated legacy fund? And how do we support the generations moving on and moving that stuff around and keeping those legacies alive? So
yeah, I mean, West Michigan Club last night, we did a silent auction for the last of one of our members, a longtime member who passed away New Year's Day.
Yeah.
And his family gave us everything.
Okay.
And they said before he died, Bob said, call Tim because
he'll help you take care of this.
Yeah, it'll die otherwise.
Right.
Now, it was in the middle of the winter, so it was a little easier for us, but still.
Sure.
And the club has raised a pretty decent amount of money. We're going to figure out something to do to honor him with some of that.
Yeah.
But
so those kind of things, although it sounds like they're happening very organically, just in the moment, right? It comes
almost,
up.
They almost have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I said to my wife, I have a pacemaker, and so when I got the pacemaker, you know, before I went under the knife, we did all kinds of things, and I said, you know, if I don't make it out of this, the first call is to somebody to water. You know,
someone go water his trees.
Yeah, and I have friends who do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, it's a very serious thing,
Yeah.
unless you just want to let them fade away.
As stressful as it may be at times at someone's end of the road, and what do we do with all this? And you got to act now, and it's hopefully going to happen. But people step up when they have to, and it
seems
works.
to work.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
one thing I want to say about the Weichel Fund.
Yeah.
So Saturday, July 9th was Jack's 90th birthday, and that was the day
that was
of the
the
auction.
day of the auction.
And we did it at Hidden Lake Gardens, and afterwards, I wasn't so involved in this, but they went to another building, and the Ann Arbor Bonsai Society threw him a birthday party, which he knew about.
Okay.
And we got proclamations from the governor and from the U.S. senators, and I mean, it was really fun.
That's fabulous.
But I and a few others stayed to make sure that people could pick up their stuff, and we cleaned up the place, and it was amazing what the volunteers did for us, with us.
That must have been, what a massive undertaking. You must be just
proud.
Pretty proud of what just happened.
I was pretty high for a week.
Yeah, I can't imagine you wouldn't be. That's
and I'm quick to say, I said to my wife, you know, I see all these people with defined jobs, and they're sitting there doing them, and what am I doing? And she looked at me and goes, don't even go there, you know, come on.
You've done a lot. You've done a lot.
Felt really good. Find classes, and you can usually do that somewhere surrounding a club.
Yeah.
If you're in Grand Rapids, the Meyer Gardens offers classes both individually during the year, and we have 2 shows a year there, and there are classes at each show.
Yep.
Same thing, I go to Chicago Botanic Garden and still take a class with the guest master because it's cheap. You know, $50, and you get to spend 4 hours with somebody.
That's awesome.
And 10 of your best friends. But, you know, education, it's important. And I'd find a mentor.
Yeah.
And you can't do that immediately.
Yeah.
You got to kind of sit back and watch and see what's happening.
Yeah.
I first met Jack Weichel at the Michigan All-State show, and I'd heard of him. He's sort of legendary around here, but you meet him, and he's not legendary at all, man. He's just a guy, and he'll talk to you and answer your questions and help you. So I had this Fukian tea that I thought was just really cool, and I entered it in the show, and I went over kind of happily and said, Jack, I'd met him earlier in the day, can you give me a little critique of this? And we walked over, and he turned it around and said, I like it better that way. and he was right.
Sure.
You know, but again, all these decisions are subjective.
They are.
And
they are.
And he said, you might like it the other way. And I looked at it a little bit, and I thought, I'm not going to turn this back around, man. He just improved my tree.
He just made it tenfold better. Any other thoughts or tidbits on bonsai and the journey and what it means to you, or just kind of where you think it's going to go?
There's a couple things I'd like to say.
Yeah.
Guard your trees. There's thieves everywhere.
We had a problem with that last year.
Well, everybody, some point or another. And I heard this the first year I was in bonsai and thought, And I lived in a house that was very visible across from a school, and a lot of kids came up and down the street, and they go over there and play basketball. And one night, a bonsai disappeared off a windowsill.
Oh.
And you know, my son and I both said it'll be dead in a couple days, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So then I used a cable system and cabled them all down, and I hated it.
Yeah.
And now I have a backyard that may be pretty nice. But if you notice, my front yard's just pretty mediocre.
Pretty mediocre.
You know, it doesn't signal anything.
You don't want to attract attention. Well, wonderful. We have a beautiful backyard. I love the pond. I love the trees. And I just can't thank you enough for your time.
Well, I'm glad you came.
Yeah.
And this has been a really interesting week. I get a text last night from somebody in the Ann Arbor area. And Jack Sustick, who I'm working with now, was here yesterday, and he said, do you mind if I give your name to somebody? He's a good friend, and he's really going to be in West Michigan this weekend and would like to look at a couple gardens. So I get a note from him, and he says, can we talk? And I know what he's interested in, of course. And so maybe this weekend we're going to do, maybe not a podcast, but
there you go. Fantastic.
It's fun to show them off.
You know, anybody who will spend an hour or two talking bonsai, I'm all there. So.
Yeah, we're crazy. So
that's awesome.
We're all crazy.
We are just a little bit of crazy. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Stay cool.
You're welcome.
My walk at Lake Park is coming to a close, and that also ends up the show with Tim Cox. So Up North Bonsai is the podcast that you can find on my website, and that is bonsaiacres.com. It's also in the link in the description here on this YouTube show. Tim Cox was so gracious to have me over there. We spent a couple hours together, even got to help him move one of his big trees. Thanks to Tim. Had a great time. So check out the full interview on Up North Bonsai podcast, and we've got some more stuff to show you on my trip through Michigan. We're going to head east. More of that to come. Yeah, we're going to interview the one and the only Jack Weichel. I can't wait to show you that footage. Until then, take care of you, take care of your bonsai, and we'll catch you very, very soon.